Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar series presented to you by the Community Technical Assistance Center of New York. This is the first of a series on transition-age youth, and we're very excited to have Geraldine Jerry Burton here today, parent partner extraordinaire, to present on the caregiver perspective and things that providers should know, some suggestions, some recommendations, and ways of exploring how to help families through this transition and really bringing in the caregiver. I want to take a minute before I introduce Jerry officially to just orient everybody to the webinar. So on the right-hand side, you have a panel. There is a chat box at the bottom, and there are going to be times that we're going to ask you to answer some questions, submit some comments, suggestions, in that chat box. Just make sure that you, it says send to all panelists before you hit send so that the panelists can see your responses. Feel free to also submit some comments throughout the webinar and questions, and any question we don't get to kind of reply to during the webinar we'll hold towards the end. Currently, everybody is also muted. So because of the large number of attendees, we won't be able to unmute you so you can speak. So that's also why we have that chat function. So please feel free to utilize that. If you happen to have any technical difficulties, you can send your chat to the host. So again, use that chat box. Make sure then it says send to host for any technical difficulties specific to the webinar software or system or the conference line. We're very excited as I see people are logging on. We're going to have a good amount of people registered and attending, but I see a good mix of providers, parent partners, family support staff, and youth advocates. I think this will be a really great opportunity to also hear what your experiences have been and any other recommendations, as we probably won't be able to cover everything having to do with transition-age youth, especially from the caregiver perspective in a one-hour webinar, but we're going to do the best that we can. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Jerry. Geraldine Burton is a single parent of 2 children, both of whom have a mental health diagnosis. She began her work as a parent advocate for the Mental Health Association of New York City at the Bronx Parent Resource Center, where she was employed for 12.5 years. Jerry also is a senior research coordinator for the IDEA Center based at the NYU Child Study Center here at New York School of Medicine. She's also a co-investigator on a number of studies, especially studies really focusing on the role of family support in mental health services. She is also a certified NAMI trainer and facilitates NAMI New York City Metro Family to Family, NAMI Basics, and Homefront education programs. As a veteran mental health advocate, Jerry is a pioneer of the mental health family support movement in New York State. She's a member of Families on the Move of New York City. She's a staff here at the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy Research. She's a consultant for us here at the Community Technical Assistance Center, and she's also vice president of the board of Families Together in New York State. So we're very excited to have Jerry with us today to really give her perspective and her experience on working with caregivers and supporting families through this process. So thank you, Jerry, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for that intro. Good afternoon to everyone. I am so pleased that you've taken time from your busy schedule to join us for this very important topic. So, as you can see, our agenda for today is as follows: what is transitioning, concerns specific to transition-age youth, the role of the caregiver, steps for preparing the caregiver. We're going to have a Q&A, and there'll be resources at the end. And this helpful information is from the this is helpful information from the child adolescent clinician, but also for the adult clinician. And if the discussion hasn't happened with the caregiver by the time the caregiver comes into adult services, then the adult clinician may need to go through this process. So I'm sure that it'll be very helpful for you going forward. I would like to acknowledge the National Alliance on Mental Illness, especially the program called NAMI Basics, overseen by Terry Brewster. I will cover some of the information from this program, but as a trainer, I highly recommend this program for caregivers. Please visit the website for more information.
So I'm going to jump in sometimes with some of the interactive features. You have a poll that just popped up on the right-hand side, and we wanted to gauge who's participating with us today. So who do you primarily work with? And are you working primarily in your role with children and adolescents? Are you primarily working with adults in mental health services? Both. Many of you may be working with the full population, or neither. Maybe you have a slightly different role and the reason why you're logging on. So feel free to reply to that poll. And as soon as we have enough responses, Evelyn, our host, is going to show the results. But I think this is just a way of also gauging, as Jerry said, the information that we're giving to you for these youth can really support both the adolescent clinician, the clinician who's working with adolescent clients, as well as the clinician who's receiving these youth in the adult services. So please just take a second to finish replying, and I think in about another second the results will pop up. Probably just another second. It should pop up in the same place on that right-hand side, and we'll also kind of read the results to you. Okay, so thank you everybody for those that replied. It looks like a good number of you are working with children. About 31% who were able to reply said that. Adults, just under 10% are working with adults, but there's also a good number of you, around 21%, that are working with both children, adolescents, and adults. There's a few of you that also, just about a third of you, didn't get to answer. So thank you for those that replied. That really kind of helps us kind of gear the presentation to ensure that we're reaching the right audience. So thank you very much.
Okay, so moving forward, what is transitioning? Transition is the process of change when you pass from one state to another. And we all know that life is full of transitions, and they all involve a level of discomfort. Just looking at this slide, the picture with the butterfly coming out of the cocoon, just think about how uncomfortable it is to be cooped up. But then once you do come out, it can be very scary.
So we wanted to, as we're exploring this role of transitioning, we wanted to ask you kind of your experiences and how smooth was that transition for you yourself as you were moving from adolescence to young adulthood. And then I also wanted to see if you could take a moment and think, you know, how smooth was that transition for your parents at the same time, and in the perspective that you have now, what do you think they also felt? How did they feel? So please use that chat box on the right-hand side towards the bottom. There's a little box that's empty right now. You can type in your response. In the drop-down, make sure you send to all panelists, and then hit send so we can start seeing your responses. So please, there's sometimes a little bit of a delay as the responses come in, so please feel free to start submitting those as soon as you can. How smooth was that transition for you? And how smooth was that transition for your parents? What were some of the challenges that you experienced? What were some of the challenges that your parents experienced that really kind of stood out for all of you? I know, and Jerry and I spent some time talking about this. Sometimes, you know, the challenges can be the typical ones, like dealing with priorities and responsibilities and just trying to gather. I know, Jerry, your son had also an interesting experience as well.
Absolutely. As a parent, it wasn't easy for me, and however, I knew I had taught him and my daughter well, and I had hope, trust, and I believed that things would work out. It was also helpful that we had a support system, that we worked hard to keep that support system in place. We had friends, we had family, we had church members, and there were colleagues of mine who knew my children as well, and my children knew that they could trust them as well. So that was very, very important, very helpful.
Yeah, so we got a few that are coming in, and I think some have highlighted the difficult transition, that they didn't feel understood, and then on the other side, the parent side, that it was a stormy relationship oftentimes with the caregiver, Others said it was pretty smooth, and probably because they had a number of supports in their lives, sort of what you were just saying, Jerry.
Exactly.
That, really making that time that you really put effort in to ensure that your son had a lot of support systems connected to him.
Absolutely.
Others have identified that it was particularly challenging and some particular instances in which it was challenging. So please we're going to move on, but please keep submitting some of those experiences and what that was like for you.
Absolutely. So as we move forward, these are some common challenges of transitions for youth. We have managing money, prioritizing, managing time, making solid decisions, changing social relationships. And I can also remember a time when my children were dealing with these, and sometimes they still do. And in moving backwards to what we just talked about in the previous slide about themes that I've heard, about it being stormy, challenging, and these are typical things that happen. But again, if you have supports in place and you are in communication with your children, it does make things a little bit smoother. It can be very helpful. Okay. So now, imagine what it would be like for someone who has significant mental health challenges. What do we know about transition age youth? So let's talk about that. What are some of the challenges we know? We see that there are high risks for criminal activity, incarceration, substance abuse. There's also rates of serious mental illness are high among young adults age 18, and the rates decrease for every year thereafter. Again, these are just some of the statistics that we have, and we know there are a lot more, but these are ones that we know are very challenging. Concerns specific to transition age youth. In addition to typical challenges all adolescents experience, youth with mental health issues deal with having to learn how to navigate multiple programs and service delivery systems on their own. They struggle with independence versus interdependence. They may need their caregivers but may not want their input, and we know that that happens a lot with transition age youth. They have to identify and access appropriate services, have to manage their own medications, and have to deal with stigma associated with having mental health issues. All of this is made worse because the stigma associated with mental illness is always around. And in all of this, caregivers are often left out of the process. And we know that to be true as well. Those of you who are on this webinar who are parents of children, you know that that is a lot of times how things happen. So why should providers engage caregivers? Caregivers can have insight that is valuable to the providers, such as family history, strengths, knowledge of alcohol or substance abuse. But more importantly, involving caregivers helps maintain the youth social support system. Caregivers are important collaborators that help the youth transition in a more seamless and efficient process, which we know, again, is very, very important, and we need everyone to be at the table to make sure that the process runs smoothly. From the caregiver's perspective, in working with caregivers, it is often important to meet them where they are in the process, and oftentimes they struggle with this role change as their adolescents become adults. The caregiver is now looking through a different set of lens, but the world now sees them very differently, and that view will continue to change as their child ages. The caregiver is no longer in the driver's seat, and sometimes the youth won't even let them into the passenger side of the car. As a parent of a child with mental illness facing transition into adult services, it can feel like you are throwing your child off the cliff. And this may be a bigger leap for the caregiver than the child. learning to let go can be very difficult. Um, I will acknowledge that this may not be the same experience for everyone, but it may be easier for some caregivers than others. For some caregivers, it may be a sigh of relief. Well, I don't have to deal with that child anymore because they have put me through all kinds of hell and back again. And for others, you know, the thought may be that we're done, you know, and with the caregiving, and they realize that they are not. And we just have to realize that, you know, with the proper supports and, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, anyway, they will find out that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And, of course, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, which as we move forward, we will get into that. And I also want to say that sometimes for the youth, it may be a relief as well, because that way they don't have their parent or caregiver breathing down their neck, telling them what to do. They think that, you know, they're grown now, so they can do whatever they need to do or want to do. So it could work both ways. Steps to transitioning caregivers. So sometimes we have to think about transitioning the caregiver as well as the youth with the goal of supporting the youth. So as we move forward, we'll be talking about processing caregiver expectations. We'll be discussing caregiver concerns to the youth, preparing the caregiver, and we'll be going through some tools, handouts, and available adult services, and encouraging collaborative service planning between the provider, the youth, and the caregiver as appropriate. Processing caregiver expectations. So this is, I love this slide. This slide, I'm telling you, is so great. So this slide is a shift in their role, which can feel overwhelming, anxiety, and fear. Emotionally, seeing your child move out of protective family custody, which is on the left, the family land, and where the parent is the CEO, is a difficult process. And then moving forward to the adult child land where the parent is the partner. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not an automatic process. We are all moving from known territory to uncharted territory, and we have to find a way for all of us to arrive as intact as possible, regardless of the individual course we are set to get there. For example, in the slide, by the picture of the boat and or the bridge in the illustration. But the only chance to stay afloat is hope, and you see that in the boat. And I put it in green because of mental health. They are counting on us to bridge the gap. Very important, very, very important. And again, it's a huge, huge shift, absolutely. And again, but it's something that, if at all possible, can be done, needs to be done. So from parent as CEO to partner. It's important that parents see themselves as the partner and not the CEO anymore. As a provider, you can meet with the parent, caregiver, and discuss or gauge some of the following issues. What does this feel like knowing you are no longer the CEO? Have you already experienced it? What are your expectations if you haven't experienced this? And these sets of questions are exploring and processing the concerns that the parent caregiver has. And then the goal of every parent is to raise their child in a way that eventually they won't need them anymore. But it is difficult to see them go. So this is empathy and validation of what the parent is feeling. It is possible to grow up without growing apart. We have to help each other, and this is instilling hope. All of these are very, very important for the parent to be able to come to grips with. And again, I'm going to say it again. I'll say it over and over again. It is not an easy process. It doesn't happen automatically. But with the help of able-bodied providers and other parent advocates or youth advocates and others who you trust and you know who are going to be supportive for you, it is possible. So some key messages to caregivers. You are not alone, and you should connect with other parents. Parents need to know that others have gone before, survived, and some have even watched their children thrive, and I can attest to that. It's important for caregivers to know their rights and the rights of their child at the stages that they're going through, and instill a sense of hope. Again, very important. You've heard me talk about hope a couple other times. Again, hope is so very important. And prioritize self-care. It's important that we take care of ourselves in this process, and there's a little saying, and I'm sure some of the family advocates have heard this before: if you can't take care of yourselves, you won't be able to take care of anyone else. And I also want to share with you that connecting with other parents who've been through the journey is very helpful. And you can attend a support group. You can educate yourself. Again, like I said, there are family and youth advocates that are located throughout the 5 regions of New York State, and I would encourage you to get some information from family advocates and organizations that are available to help parents with this information as well. And a lot of the resources are at the end of our presentation, so you can definitely take advantage of those. Discussing caregiver concerns for youth. As you are processing with the caregiver this new role of theirs, an important piece is discussing their primary concerns for youth. For most parents, most times fear is at the root of every thought we have about watching our children head out into the world on their own. For example, how will I know if my child will include me in the transition process? If my child needs me when I can't see them every day? If my child is taking his or her medications? If my child decides to drink or use recreational drugs? Who are they in relationships with? If they are keeping appointments, if they are attending school or work regularly. These are things that happen that caregivers are concerned about, and there's a fear involved in all of this. And this reminds me of a parent who called me frantically before one of my trainings and was concerned that her son no longer wanted her involved in his treatment. So I took the time to talk to her about what her role can or should be in the process, how to communicate with her son and the providers, but highlighting the fact that her son had the final say. And again, that can be a tough pill to swallow, but it is the reality of moving into the adult system. And it's important that providers address that anxiety that parents and caregivers experience. Again, that way it alleviates a lot of the fear, and it lets them know that you are willing to collaborate and partner with them, and you care about what it is, the fear and concerns, and you validate what it is that the caregiver is experiencing. Preparing the caregiver. So on the slide it says, we've considered every possible risk except the risk of avoiding all risks. We can't keep our children in a bubble. We have to figure this out so that our children can have the most independent life possible. And most importantly, so we can have a life. That's important. That goes back to that self-care. Think about some of the things that we as parents want to do, but we feel we can't do them because for the simple fact that we have to be so involved with our children. For example, not being able to take a vacation, and just being able to, say for instance, you want to take swimming lessons, and you can't because you feel you have to stay home and babysit your child, and just all types of things, or maybe going back to school. So it's important that this helps, that this happens, that you can have a life. And it is possible to have a life as well.
So we wanted to take a minute and open up the discussion. and just see, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about some things that Jerry has utilized in supporting caregivers and some recommendations. But there's many of you on that are doing this work now. There are many parent partners on the phone as well as youth advocates on the line. So can you use that chat box and let us know what have you done that has supported caregivers in this process? What are some specific tips, strategies, things that you have found to be really successful in supporting caregivers? So use that chat box again on the right-hand side and send to all panelists and then hit send. That way we can all see your responses. And I have a couple that have already coming in that, you know, although that it's not easy, it's important to connect families with some of the community events and getting them education, advocacy, support, and connecting them to maybe recreational, cultural, a number of different activities, seeing what's in the surrounding environment and connecting them to that. And it sounds, Sherry, like that really goes back to this idea of highlighting that they're not alone. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that most parents always feel, that they're the only one that's going through what they're going through. But once they get connected with other parents and caregivers, or if they have the opportunity to work with a family advocate, they know that they are not alone. And just, again, light at the end of the tunnel.
And please keep submitting some of those responses as they're coming in. This is really helpful. I think others are saying that it's really difficult to do this and may not be sure. So I think we're seeing that as well. So hopefully some of the guides that we're going to give you will be some tools that you can utilize. But we also see some that say, you know, bottom line, it's just important to be a support for the caregiver, orienting them, giving information, and helping them support through this change. Change is not easy for most of us.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so some have also highlighted that that it's also difficult, and that moving, especially with a youth who's experiencing a number of like social, academic, or emotional issues, that transition from kind of leading and being that network, that support for that child, and then seeing them have to kind of navigate things on their own.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And it can be difficult, again, as I said earlier, it can be very difficult, but if you have the right supports in place and if you know where to get that support, that can be very helpful. And a lot of times it's not that visible. Sometimes, you know, I find that folks want to hold on to information. They don't want to share it. And on the flip side of that, sometimes parents are afraid to ask for help because they figure, I got this, I can do this. But I would encourage providers to encourage the parent and caregiver to help them, even if you have to role play with them, you know, how to ask for help. And, you know, some parents and caregivers were raised within their families where they didn't ask for help, but it's important, you ask. There's so many resources available. They may not all, the same resources may not be available in all the regions, but there are plenty of resources available. You just have to know where to look to get them, you know, so.
I think, Jerry, that just highlights the some key messages that providers and people, parent partners, and people that are working with the caregiver, some key messages to give them or approach them, knowing that
right.
If you know, because they're not asking doesn't mean that they have it all together.
Exactly.
That sometimes as the providers, we have to approach the caregivers and ask them how it's going,
right.
and really kind of take that role.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
And then there are times when you have to, you know, kind of prompt them, well, what have you done, you know? And if they say nothing, you know, well, you can give them some ideas, or maybe say, have you thought about contacting a family advocate, you know, which family advocates have been through this. Most family advocates have had a child or children with a mental health diagnosis, and so we've been through that journey, and so we know. We may not have been through the same exact thing that that particular parent or caregiver has gone through, but we know how to navigate the system. We know about the resources that are available, And as I like to say, sometimes we know who's who at the zoo. Not that we're animals, but.
Thank you, Terry. I did want to highlight this other piece, and I think we kind of touched on is this the fears that the caregiver has, but also because, as some of you have written in, that it's the challenge is also sometimes the caregiver themselves is struggling with their own mental health issues, and sort of supporting them. I think when you're talking about self-care, it also means taking the time for them to be able to focus on themselves and address some of those issues.
Yeah.
And empowering them in that way.
Yeah, that's extremely important. Again, I go back to my saying, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone. And yes, there are a lot of parents and caregivers who have mental health diagnoses. But again, for providers, meet families where they are, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but it's important to meet them where they are and, you know, just moving forward and working with them.
So thank you, everybody, for those responses. Please keep using that chat box, submit questions for Jerry, anything that has worked with you, any concerns that you have. Please feel free to keep submitting some of those questions.
I just want to piggyback about the fear factor that we kind of talked about. Fear is, a little bit of fear is typical, but if your fears are to the point where you are paralyzed and you can't move, then that's a huge issue. And so, you know, for providers, I'm sure you would be able to know, you would know that. And sometimes parents and caregivers, they've gone through this for so long, it's the norm for them. So, and they don't even realize that fear is so huge and it's paralyzing for them. So, you know, it's important that caregivers are able to identify that as well. And even a parent partner could do the same thing. Not that the parent partner is a clinician or a therapist or a social worker, but we can identify certain things, and there are ways that we can share with another parent or caregiver that can kind of help them to understand what's going on and help and move them in the right direction to get help. Okay. So, tools and handouts. These tools we will be discussing specifically. However, there are other resources available as well, and the tools will be made available on our website at www.ctacny.com.
ctacny.com.
Right, ctacny.com. Okay. So the checklist for the transition process tells us what actions you should be taking at what age, at which ages, and gives you the option of identifying who will be taking the action. This can be utilized with the caregiver, the provider, and youth, the youth and the provider, the caregiver and the youth, or the caregiver and the provider. And I think Lydia is going to show us a copy of that.
Yes,
okay.
And Jerry, I think we just got a question a little while ago asking,
yes,
when do you start, how long in advance should you begin to work with both child and parent preparation to transitional phase?
Right, absolutely. So as you can see on the slide, it tells you, you know, it could be 12 to 15 or earlier. And then it also is telling us that the education and training post-secondary, the upper age limit is 22 in most educational areas, and there's Social Security disability programs, including Medicaid and Medicare, residential services, vocational services, residential leisure activities, and mental health and other medical services. But again, it depends on which system is going through the checklist, because I believe in the Department of Education system, I believe they start at age 14, children who are in special ed. And I might be wrong, but
so I just wanted to highlight. So if for some reason you can't see the full document, you may have a scroll bar on your screen on the right-hand side that you can kind of move it up and down so you can see the document. And again, this will be available on our website along with the webinar recording and slides. So what this highlights for you is really for you and for the caregiver, so you can really kind of share this with them to really start thinking through what are those kind of long-term goals. And this really highlights the need to maybe do it even at a younger age, but chances are we're probably all really not thinking about it until around 16 to 18.
Right.
And that's also at the time where you can have those discussions around education and training, or what are the vocational aspects, if anything? What are the services, insurance? What's that process going to be like? What types of adult services, residential, vocational, mental health? So this was a really great guide from NAMI Basics that really highlighted some key areas to start thinking about as a child is growing, and both that the caregiver can have, but you as a provider can have to help facilitate some of those discussions. So some of these may not apply to everybody, but I think it was a good resource to utilize it and to share.
And again, as I said earlier, you know, you should begin as early as possible, and that way the child won't fall through the cracks when they're transitioning from the adolescent services into the adult arena.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, that's not to say that if they're 17 or they're 18 already that it's too late.
No, it's not. But I mean, here in the city, and you know, from my experience of working with families and working in the community, a lot of times once a child hits 16, it's like, you know, and they're going for services for the first time, or maybe they were at one agency and going to another. It's like hands off. We don't want to deal with this because in a few years this child is going into the adult arena, so it brings up a lot of issues. So just know that. Okay. So then we have the parent-family perspective. The parent-family assessment form identifies the areas that the parents should explore with the youth, for example, jobs, school, housing, recreation, transportation, social life, health, and personal management. But most of the time, our goals and assessments are different. The point is we are communicating about it, and that's what's really, really important. You have to have that conversation with your child. This form can be used by the parent or the child, or I would suggest you use it together, the parent and the child together, sit down and discuss what the perspectives are. And so Lydia is going to show us that.
I'm just going to pull it up, and again, you have a scroll bar that if for some reason you can't see me kind of scrolling up and down, you may be able to do it yourself. So this is really kind of an approach that as a caregiver, you can talk with the youth and kind of sit through and help think through some strategies, some ideas, some long-term goals. You know, which do you think is most realistic in terms of academics, in terms of work? What are some strengths? And then there's a second page that also looks at housing, independent living, what is sort of the future, what are the concerns, recreation, leisure. So it covers a few different areas, and I think, you know, there may be many more.
Absolutely.
This is sort of just a guide and a tool that can help you in the discussions that you have with the caregiver, but it's also something you can easily hand to the caregiver and support them in utilizing with their youth and just thinking through this process ahead of time. Lives are oftentimes overwhelming for their caregivers. They may be focused on the day-to-day and just getting through the day. And this longer-term planning oftentimes is then left till the very last minute when you're told, well, you know, you can no longer get services here. Your child is too old. And then it's running around trying to do those things at the last minute. So these are just tools, resources, and we like to give, here at CTEC, we like to give everybody as many tools as possible to see if these are some things that you can utilize in your work.
So the youth perspective, the focus on the youth perspective and guides for transitioning will be covered in our next webinar, which will be on November 5th. And it's my understanding that some folks from Youth Power will be doing that presentation. I believe is Zach, and I forgot the other person's name, but anyway. If you go on the website, the information is there. And I apologize for not remembering the other person's name. Okay, so Explaining available adult services. Determining services within and outside of the mental health system that can meet the needs of youth. So there's this toolkit that I heard about a while back, and I utilized it. And this toolkit was developed by Judith Carrington and supported by NAMI New York State, OMH, and the Family Institute. And this family toolkit can be, it's done by, like I said, Judith Carrington, and she is the founder of the Mental Health Resources. And in this kit, it includes a family survival handbook, a pamphlet for family participation, a booklet on federal and state confidentiality laws to equip families to become full partners in the recovery process. And the website is there. And this particular toolkit is helpful for the provider, the family, as well as the consumer. And Lydia is going to bring that up. The website, I believe, was
well,
the toolkit.
So the website,
the handbook,
I'll show that. The website is mentalhealthed.org. And there you're going to be able to access a number of resources, but in particular we wanted to highlight the Family Survival Handbook, Reaching Mental Health Recovery Together, Tools for and by Families. And so you can, I'm just going to show the table of contents briefly, and again, you can scroll if you can't see this. But it really kind of is a detailed guide and manual to really think through issues of confidentiality, participation in services, what the treatment team looks like, who's involved in those discussions, you know, and a number of a variety of different areas that may be particularly important for the caregiver to know, but also there's a lot of information there that the youth should know.
Absolutely.
And so whether that information is coming to the youth from you as the provider, or it's coming to them from the caregiver, or ideally both, this is a really good and useful guide.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I've met Judith, and I've had many conversations with her, and she is the parent of a daughter, I believe, who has a mental health diagnosis. So this is something that she's not foreign to, and she did an excellent job with doing this. And again, it's been endorsed by OMH, NAMI New York State, and the Family Institute. So when you get a chance, definitely check it out. So collaborative service planning. As a child adolescence provider, what makes this different for you is that the youth is really in the driver's seat. And because of that, you need to have discussions with the youth about including the caregiver. Again, the youth is the decision maker, having all parties at the table, orienting to available services in the community, detailing a plan that describes everyone's role, which is very important, and especially very important as well, follow up in an agreed upon timely manner. And when you're doing these service planning, collaborative service planning, you need to stay away from blame. Keep it a strength-based and positive and a safe and trusting environment. Giving voice. Everyone should be able to speak and be heard. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And, again, the provider, the caregiver, and the youth need to collaborate and be equal partners in the process, which is extremely important. When I was working at the Bronx Parent Resource Center, we had collaborative service planning, and where the parent was, well, in that time, at that particular time, it wasn't for the what we're talking about now, but it's important that in the partnership, everyone is heard, as I said earlier. It's just important that everyone, you don't have to be on the same page, but you need to be moving in a positive, strength-based way in order for services and for the process to work. And it is a shift, definitely a shift, because, again, when parents are shifting from being the CEO to the partner, there's just so much, it could be all types of drama happening. The parent may not want to give up their CEO position, and the youth may not want the youth may not want the parent involved at all. Okay, questions?
So thank you, Jerry. I think we gave a really good overview in the time that we have with you to really cover a variety of different areas, really, highlighting the importance of incorporating the caregivers, really thinking through how to help them and understand that there's really a role shift, so empathizing and validating the caregivers that they're really dealing with a role shift in their lives, whether that's something they were looking forward to or not looking forward to or maybe didn't even expect.
Right.
But that the idea is that to really engage the caregiver, it may involve a discussion on the provider's part around some of those issues and fear. Absolutely. And the anxiety that parents have for their children as they transition to adulthood, in addition to just navigating sort of these complex mental health systems and a variety of other kind of related systems that young adults have to function in. And Jerry, I think the tools that you've highlighted are particularly important and helpful tools that can guide you through the transition process, through even starting as early as possible, but through definitely adolescence. Some tools that caregivers can utilize, or providers can give to caregivers to utilize with their youth and start thinking about it. So please submit some of your questions. I know I'm just going to reiterate that the webinar recording, the slides, and the handouts will be posted on www.ctagny.com. They will be posted under clinical trainings or resources, and they probably aren't up yet as the recording, as we're still during the webinar, but probably in the next couple days, you'll be able to see those resources posted. So please make sure to keep checking back the website. We have a couple questions coming in. Please feel free to keep submitting them as we have a couple minutes. One question that is asked is, and I'm going to just pull it up again, the family assessment. The question was, how often, when should you utilize this? Any suggestions in terms of utilizing this with the youth for the caregiver?
I would say, again, as I stated earlier, you should do it as early as possible. And say, for instance, if you're going to start at age 12, I would say in another 2 years, check in again, and as much as needed, so you can just be sure. So by the time they get to that age where they're going to be transitioned into an adult arena, that you will know. And that way you can also compare, and you'll see if progress has been made or if progress hasn't been made. But again, it's just important that you do that so you'll know how things are going in that process.
Yeah, and continuing that discussion. So part of that is, as a provider, I'm thinking that maybe it's also continue to check in with the caregiver, right, and the youth, really kind of having that collaborative discussion and thinking through some of these sort of goals that they have as a family, especially in the collaborative service planning.
Right. And the thing is, I mean, as I stated earlier, start at the age of 12. At the age of 12, they may not be sure what they want to do, so, things are going to change. My son changed several times, what he wanted to do. And when I think about myself growing up, and at one point in time I said I wanted to be a librarian, and then another time I wanted to go into the Navy. So, I mean, you go through these different transitions based upon, what you're exposed to and how things are in your particular family dynamics and who you look up to and what your parents, caregivers have done or bringing to the table, or with your friends. A lot of times people want to be what someone else wants to be. Somebody wants to be a basketball player, or they want to be a DJ because their best friend is one of those. So, again, the changes are going to come, but it's just important to keep the lines of communication open and just be aware. And sometimes for parents, that can be very difficult because, we want to say, oh, why do you want to do that? Well, listen, meet them where they are. Just be open to it and just know that they're going to probably change their minds, through the course of as they go through the different stages.
So we have a couple more questions that come in, and again, please keep submitting them. How do you assist the caregiver who may be concrete in their thought process around what abilities the child has and when they should be trusted to attempt new responsibilities?
Ooh, that's a good question. Again, I think I would say, again, meet them where they are, assist and support them as much as you possibly can. Definitely hear what they have to say. Listen to what they're saying. And also, be it a provider, a family advocate, or even another youth, talk to the youth as well and find out, what it is, where they are in this process. And I think that would be very helpful. Lydia, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're also kind of saying is that the conversation in terms of sort of what is the youth capable of doing, and
right.
when can you trust that they can do it, right? So it's sort of the question, and
right.
that as a caregiver may not have an accurate perception, or they may, So I think the best thing to do is kind of continue to build that communication, talk with the youth, talk with the caregiver, and kind of address some of those concerns maybe directly if at all possible. And the guides, I think sometimes just opening up the conversation, maybe they've never had them before, getting them to think through, and if you can build in time so that there is enough time to process it, both on the caregiver side, the youth side, but also as a provider, you can build in time and do this proactively. You can address some of these challenges and these perceptions with enough time to really not feel rushed and not feel like you're doing a disservice as well.
Absolutely.
So please keep submitting some of your questions. I do want to start show some of the resources that we have available and talk about our next webinar. So this is a series specific to transition age youth population. Our next webinar is the youth perspective. So today we really focused on the caregiver perspective and how providers can support and involve caregivers in the process. So we have the youth perspective then is and how we can orient youth in this process November 5th, 12:30 to 1:30. And then we have a part 3 in December, which is a little bit of a different approach, but we wanted to highlight some services that may be helpful and effective for adolescents and young adults, some intervention models that seem to cross that age range that we consider transition age youth, and that's December 3rd from 12 to 1. I also wanted to highlight that there's a number of resources out there that really can help support you in your work. And Jerry has pulled together a number of resources both from NAMI, and again, some of the materials. We thank NAMI for allowing us to share some of the materials. So feel free to go to their website at NAMI.org. OMH also has some resources specific to transition age youth. There's a number of both family support programs in New York State as well as youth advocate programs in New York State. Please feel free to contact them and reach them, and their websites are listed. And there's really this wonderful resource from Pathways RTC that also is a good guide that you can just print and hand to the caregiver as well to help in that discussion. So as much information and guidance you can give caregivers is helpful. I also wanted to highlight that one of our collaborators at CTAC is Center for Practice Innovations at Columbia Psychiatry, New York State Psychiatric Institute, and they have resources for providers working with the adult population. So it's practiceinnovations.org, and that is also supported by the New York State Office of Mental Health. But they have a number of resources. You just probably have to request access to them. But it is available to all New York State licensed programs, OMH and OASF licensed programs. And they have a number of resources that focus on wellness models. They have a different initiative specific to those experiencing their first break, their first psychosis or schizophrenia, really as a young adult or late adolescent. They have a number of resources around employment goals and how do you even have that discussion around employment goals. So we highly recommend that you check out practiceinnovations.org to really see some of the modules, the resources, and the tools that they have developed that is available to you as providers in New York State OMH and OASF licensed programs. Feel free to submit any questions. I'll keep going just so that you have our contact information. You can email Jerry directly at geraldine.burton@nymc.org. Feel free to reach me, lydia.franco@nyu.edu, with any questions specific to our series, to the webinar, or to CTAC. The website, again, is www.ctacny.com, and all the recording slides and handouts will be posted in the next couple of days. Please keep checking the clinical resources side.
Okay, so I want to thank everyone for, again, taking the time to participate in our Lunch and Learn for today, and I hope that you got some information that you could utilize. And again, as Lydia said, please contact us if you have any other questions or concern. And I also want to thank Lydia for being here with me. This is the first time I'm doing a webinar basically on my own, and so I really appreciate her being here to assist and support me and collaborate with me in this effort. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Jerry. Have a great day, and please make sure to check the next webinar, Youth Perspective, November 5th.